Tune into Nice Radio every Saturday at 7:30 a.m. for A View from the Outside, hosted by Brereton Horne. A View from the Outside takes a look at key issues affecting St Vincent and the Grenadines and gives a global perspective on how these issues are viewed. Host Brereton Horne will examine a variety of topics to enlighten, stimulate debate, and explore solutions. Hear the facts, hear the real-life stories, hear A View from the Outside. Join Brereton Horne at 7:30 a.m. every Saturday on Nice Radio for A View from the Outside.
On A View from the Outside this week. This week, being the 22nd of June 2019, we look at perception, P-E-R-C-E-P-T-I-O-N, perception, with the view being that much needs to be done to tackle and to change the perception that many things are in shambles and are falling apart in St Vincent and the Grenadines. The Cambridge Dictionary defines perception as a belief or opinion held by many people and based on how things seem. And the Collins Dictionary states that your perception of something is the way that you think about it or the impression that you have of it. Those definitions tell us that perception is the same belief or opinion held by many people about how something or someone sees them. The definitions tell us that perception is the way you think about something or someone. They also tell us that perception is the impression you have of someone or something. We, on A View from the Outside, explore this topic this week because of the perception which many people at home in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and abroad have of different things in the country. Some of these things include, but are not limited to, justice and health care, which we are going to focus on this morning. As far as justice is concerned, there is no doubt that many people are familiar with the maxim, not only must justice be done, it must be seen to be done. This maxim was given life and became a household phrase since 1923, when Lord Chief Justice Hewitt delivered the judgment in the case of Crown and Sussex Justices ex parte McCarthy. The exact words used by Lord Chief Justice Hewitt are, "It is not merely of some importance, but it is of fundamental importance that justice should not only be done, but should manifestly and undoubtedly be seen to be done." That case has become the leading precedent in relation to judicial impartiality. The maxim, however, has also been applied in diverse or different situations of law and the administrative arms of government. There is definitely a perception that justice is in short supply in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And there is also the belief of many, including those in the upper ranks of the ruling Unity Labour Party, the ULP, that justice has two faces. And by this, they mean that the rich and the powerful who support the ULP and the government get justice, and the ordinary poor man and woman and those who are perceived not to support the ULP and the government do not get justice. There is a cry for justice reverberating around the country and in many parts of the region and further afield. That is so for many poor, ordinary folks who are perceived to be dealt with more harshly than others, and who are high-powered, who are not high-powered and well-connected. There is no doubt that you, the listeners, know someone who falls into this group. There is a cry for justice for Marcus de Freitas, who after many years of having his multi-million-dollar property compulsorily acquired by government, languishes in wait for the compensation ordered to him by the court. There's a cry for justice for Bigger Biggs, who has had his multi-million-dollar business completely ruined, and as Bigger Biggs says, spitefully and maliciously destroyed by those in government. And rather than him being compensated, as promised, various arms of the state and agents of the ruling party continue to harass him on his property and deny him the quiet enjoyment of his property. There's a cry for justice for Dougie de Freitas, who has staved off various lawsuits and threats of lawsuits, which many believe are geared towards the closure of Nice Radio, the primary and perhaps the only outlet for opposition opinion in the country. Dougie de Freitas lives every day with the prosecution hanging over his head, the prosecution of charges brought against him since the 10th of December 2015, pertaining to remarks which he made on radio pertaining to the finality of the general elections of the day before, which is the 9th of December 2015. Many continue to ask, where is the justice in such interminable delay? The mention of interminable delay brings into sharp focus the time it took for the election petitions to be finally heard in the High Court in St Vincent and the Grenadines. It magnifies the perception that there was a deliberate attempt to deny justice, because many saw the interminable delay as intentional and deliberate. Delay which continued even when the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court of Appeal ordered that the case be heard expeditiously. Many saw it and continue to see it as justice delayed is justice denied. Having mentioned the election petitions, it must be said that the judgment, which was rendered by Justice Stanley John acting on the 21st of March 2019, is now the subject of an appeal by the petitioners, Ben Exeter for South Leeward and Lauren Batiste for North Windward, Justice John having ruled against them. Since that judgment, it is a known fact that the respondents in whose favor Justice Stanley John ruled made repeated and seemingly frantic requests for the judge to provide reasons for some aspects of his decision. While it is not uncommon or unheard of for a judge to be asked to provide reasons for his decision, such a request is usually made by the appellant, the side against whom the judge ruled, or by the Court of Appeal itself, and not by the respondents in whose favor the judge has ruled, which is the case here. Since those frantic or seemingly frantic requests have been made, and subsequent to the appellants having lodged their appeals, Justice Stanley John gave what are referred to as supplemental reasons in a document dated the 13th of June 2019. Paragraph 15 of those supplemental reasons has raised a serious question. No doubt, a question which the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court of Appeal would have to grapple with when they finally hear the appeal and decide on justice and the perception of justice. Paragraph 15 states that, and I quote, the ground of appeal has failed, unquote. That paragraph 15 begs the question of whether Justice John thought he was acting in an appellate capacity when clearly he ought not to have been. But as said above, that is a matter for the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court of Appeal. The perception of justice being in short supply in St Vincent and the Grenadines has also been displayed in several other facets of decision-making in the country, including in the Parliament of the country, in the Parliament of St Vincent and the Grenadines. There is now a perception that, and it is not just a perception, but it is a reality, that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is perhaps the only country in a democracy where the opposition party is prevented by the Speaker of the House from bringing a motion of no confidence against the government of the country. Unbelievably, and perhaps more absurdly, just months after that erroneous decision by the Speaker of the House, the said Speaker prevented the said opposition from bringing a private member's motion in the House of Parliament to discuss the crucial and critical issue of election or electoral reform in the country. Those two decisions have left many around the world flabbergasted with the perception that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a place where justice is not dispensed fairly. And in keeping with the maxim coined by Lord Heworth, many have the perception that justice in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is not manifestly and undoubtedly seen to be done. Surely, with St. Vincent and the Grenadines being elected to the illustrious position of a place on the United Nations Security Council as a non-permanent member, much needs to be done locally in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to change that perception, which is widely held. In relation to healthcare, the stories coming out of the country are harrowing and leave many with the perception that healthcare in the country is in total shambles. With such perception, things cannot be just left to drift aimlessly by, while citizens, ordinary poor people, feel the brunt of it and suffer and die. The most recent of these harrowing stories pertain to the young man, Ricardo Stewart, from the Grenadine island of Union Island, who reportedly, after having a stab wound, was failed miserably by the emergency services, both on Union Island and on the mainland, St. Vincent. And as a result, he succumbed to his injuries and died. Pictures circulated on social media show him dying, lying on a wall outside the Argyle International Airport, to where he took a charter plane, awaiting the arrival of an ambulance to take him to emergency care. He subsequently died. The cries of Ricardo Stewart's mother, Jacinta Stewart, and his family ring out because they feel that Ricardo may not have died had he been treated with due emergency. Surely, much more needs to be done. Surely. The cries of Oscar Allen, Brother A, are still bellowing from the shadows of the grave, begging for things to be remedied in relation to healthcare. The cries of the survivors of many who have died because of the inadequacy and insufficiency of the healthcare in the country are loud and clear. The cries of many who are constantly faced with the shortage of medication and supplies, and those who have to pay exorbitantly for medication, their cries are loud and clear. Something needs to be done by the government to stem the tide. The perception, and indeed such reality, cannot be allowed to continue. The nation must not allow it to continue. We, the people of the nation, must demand that it does not continue. We, on A View from the Outside, encourage everyone to continually remind the government of the perception and the reality pertaining to the lack of justice and the inadequacy of healthcare which exists in the country. Everyone needs to get on board. Everyone. And as you do so, we, on A View from the Outside, ask you to bear in mind the words of Malcolm X. Let these words guide you. This is what Malcolm X said, quote, "You are not to be so blind with patriotism that you cannot face reality. Wrong is wrong, no matter who does it," unquote. Vincentians, take heed. Until next week, Randy and all of the listeners, this is Brereton Horne with A View from the Outside, with a reminder to send feedback, as usual, to aviewfromtheoutside@hotmail.com. That's the email address. And you can also get us on Facebook at A View from the Outside, and on YouTube at JMB Horne, and also on Vibes Caribbean.